Hi, I'm Neil Maycock.
And I'm Greg DeBresac, and this is the Business of Media Tech.
And today we're delighted to be joined by Mike Strein from ABC. And you're actually here to talk wearing a different hat today.
Well, yeah, a little bit. You always wear the ABC hat, so you can't get away from that. But at some point that hat goes away. I'm retiring at the end of May, which I think I told
Congratulations, we're very jealous.
Thank you. 36 years at that place was enough, believe me.
Yeah, cool.
Excellent.
So 36 years. Do you want to just take us through your role at ABC and then
Sure.
we'll get on to the MXLs?
We're all in a similar age group here, but I think, we were lucky enough to ride all these waves of change. I started, it wasn't black and white, but it was analog color. And, we moved to standard definition digital, a couple versions of that, component composite, in parallel and serial. And then we moved to HD, and then we moved to IP, and we built a whole new facility from the ground up. So that's what I spent the last 6 years doing. So.
That was a huge project, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a great way to wrap up a career, frankly, and this has kind of been a thank you tour for me, going around to all the vendors that helped us get through that, and just appreciating what they gave to the table, brought to the table to help us get through that project. Yeah. Which was doing something like that during a pandemic and in new construction when you sold your buildings and you had to move in, but that's time for another podcast.
Yeah, we'll do an hour on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So the topic we want to talk to you about today is, so you've got a role of managing a business thread in the DMF MXL initiative, which is getting a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And we're excited to have you here because you've got the business focus of that rather than the pure technology.
Yeah, which I thought, and we talked about, was really quite interesting. Even the fact that there is a really clearly defined business part with a leader of what is essentially a technology spec, a technology community enterprise.
Sure. Well, let me give you a little bit of the genesis of this. First off, managing it is a strong term. Naveed and I are co-chairs of the business track. Okay. And the business track came out of there. A number of meetings in Geneva, which happened last year on Thanksgiving, which was great for the U.S. audience. So no one from the U.S. went there. And, this was meant for the technical tracks, and a lot of discussion came out there from business people there about the different things that the technical people might not be considering, right? And so Brad Gilmer from AMWA, this was a joint task force from EBU and AMWA together, came back out of that and said, we need a business track here because there are so many issues. Yeah. And it kind of twisted my arm a little bit and said, all right, I'd be glad to do this. And so we had a couple meetings. We looked at what the issues were. And there are a number of people that are very vocal. Right. And they brought up a lot of the issues. These had to do with how are people going to handle licensing? What is a liability? How is IP managed, in here? Because now we're talking about, well, first of all, we get that in a second, but it's all deployment models too, because every customer, every station, every network, every content creation facility has they're custom, right? Yeah. So some people might want an on-prem model, people might want a virtual model, some people might want a cloud model, some might want a colo model. There's dozens of models. So they wanted essentially this group to report back and prioritize the things that the technical people should be thinking about when they're developing a specification or a set of standards, or essentially the architecture for this, right? And DMF and MXL are probably some of the biggest buzzwords here at the NAB this year, the exactly. Dynamic Media Facility and Media Exchange Layer. So some of those issues are, as you started to mention, licensing, deployment models. So what our track is meant to do in supposedly 3 months, I doubt it's going to take 3 months, probably take more than 6 months. No. But it's kind of prioritize those and present those back to the technical teams so they know what the focus of the businesses are. And we were just talking before about, Devoncroft, we all went to that the other day, and it's the business of the business, right? Yeah. And if manufacturers don't make something that people will buy, what the hell good is it? And that's the intent here, is to make this something that's sellable.
Well, when we were talking about this just yesterday, when we were sort of saying, okay, there's some fundamental questions that I have around, okay, how do we support this? Once upon a time, it was all right. You had legacy hardware, you could plug it into SDI. Everyone knew that plugged into SDI, it kind of worked. That was the fabric, and you knew that if that wasn't working, you could troubleshoot that. And is that the way? Does that the way we end up going, where actually the the SI or the client takes responsibility for the end-to-end functioning, as opposed to what we're seeing now with a lot of the cloud plays, which is that one brand is kind of owning the outcome.
Yeah, in traditional models, yes, but this is supposed to be intended for best of breed, right?
Yeah.
So now if you think about it, a possible deployment model could be some hosting system, whatever that hosting system is, with competing vendors sharing the same, architecture. And what's to say if vendor A upgrades their, they need a software upgrade to fix, patch something, whatever. What if that messes up vendor B? That's
exactly.
working on the same
The
thing?
support
How do you
model
do
can't be
that?
this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And how is that managed and how is that handled? And so I think those are the teams, the technical teams that are working on this are starting to become more aware that it's an issue, and I think they'll incorporate all of that into it.
Do we start to see the rise of the managed service provider in that scenario, someone to actually manage that for the end user?
Cloud services people certainly sell them like that, sell their services like that. So potentially, yeah, and you'll get licensing models too, because that's a big part of this.
Yes.
Perpetual licenses are, maybe a thing of the past.
Yes.
How do you
But
handle
in
that?
an environment like this, I would think so.
How do you handle billing and whatnot,
Yes.
all those sorts of things. So, I think this is a natural evolution of where content creation is going.
Yes.
I wrote a couple articles in 20 and 22 when we were starting the Galaxy project, what we thought the eventual, where it would go. And like we called it back then a software-defined facility. That's, DMF is kind of dynamic media facility. It's probably
it's
a better
very
term,
close, yeah.
but it sounds, better and nicer. But I think we all envisioned, and we, sat with a lot of vendors and looked at their 5-year roadmaps. Where were they moving in a true software-based model? So we could, if we had to buy hardware at this point, where do we go? And pretty much in unison, that's what they were thinking, because that's where they know where this needs to go, right? So much more dynamic.
Well, I think so much of it's actually being driven from forces outside our industry.
Sure.
Honestly, we are that much compared to the wider world of SaaS and OpEx models.
That's a great point, and that's where I think some of the concerns came out of the Geneva meetings, that it was being run by non-traditional broadcasting type people and their models of development, which nothing wrong with that, but the broadcasters, look at how they create content, and any downtime means loss of revenue, and blowing a commercial is a little different than other sorts of outages. So, so I think that's where some of those concerns came from.
Yeah.
I think of the IP model too. You have your code sit next to somebody else's code. In all the companies you've worked at, you never really did that.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The idea of the containerized model, and you basically, essentially, I'll ship you my little container, and you have your little container. We're sitting on the same server.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And we're sharing, DMA. We're sharing all this. Everything's going back and forth. So that's.
But at its foundation, isn't MXL's going to be open source? Mm-hmm. And so, in this whole sort of support thing is, I struggle a little, is a major sort of broadcast operation going to put their infrastructure on an open source platform? And then, coming back to what is the support model for that?
Yeah. Well, these are all great questions. And Linux too, as Linux migrates and upgrades, the kernels change. I've heard that a number of times.
But
in
Linux
the past few days.
Linux in and of itself is actually a kind of a good, Red Hat.
There's commercialized.
There is commercialized versions, and perhaps that's the way that we have certain orientations of it.
Yeah.
I think that there's, as you say,
Open source means that there can be many ways of doing things, and I think that naturally, in a way, we need to figure those out. Through experience.
Yeah. Typically, large companies, certainly the Walt Disney Company has a global information security that will, if you have something that's open source, they want to review that.
Yes.
So I'm sure there are going to be reviews of things going forward if you propose products that do these sorts of things. So, and that's probably prevalent in many companies. So, but I think that's something to look at. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not going to be everyone all at once, is it?
Yeah.
There are some real trailblazers that are...
And think about how we write code now. People aren't writing code anymore. The engines are writing the code.
Yeah.
And, I've had discussions with people, if the engine's writing the code all the time, it's probably putting the same vulnerabilities in all the code. And then you have to, access and, look at all the vulnerabilities. So there's so many things to think about.
Yeah.
But that's why, the people that are working on this are smart people.
Yeah.
And they'll figure all this out.
So what do you think the time horizon is before we see really substantial deployments of this? I can imagine like we're probably already at the point where people are sort of piloting.
Yeah. They were early
examining the
adopters.
technology. Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
like they're always like CBC is very huge proponent of this, and you know, but they have a somewhat different model than many of the others of us have, and some of us just built a facility, so it's not anything we're going to do shortly. But again, like we said before, this is the eventual evolution of where things are going, and it's you know, going to give you the flexibility that nothing else really can. I mean, IP started that, and now you know, a truly software. Facility can really accomplish that and change, and you know, because we all morph and change. We have new shows, we pivot, we do things. You know, look at podcasts. You know, podcasts didn't have video. Now they all have.
Exactly.
It's a studio. Yeah, exactly. So things change.
And so what are some of the sort of operational implications in terms of, is it going to enable, you know, new types of operation? Is it efficiency, agility? What are the sort of key gains you think people are looking at?
So I don't think it changes the operation on how, like, we're sitting here and talking in an interview. That could have been the same way 50 years ago, right? So that doesn't change, and someone's controlling, but it can be more flexible and you know, orchestrated and do all these sorts of things. But the support teams that have to support this is a completely different model, right? So you know, it's very, very, very different. You know, it changed going from traditional television, you know, dedicated architectures to IP, and now it's going to change again. And how do you manage this? How do you support it? How do you figure out where the problems are? Analytics. That's what it's going to be.
And it is that analytics and orchestration layer that's going to become super important to the way that the media facility is run.
Yeah, you're going to have to know the stats of everything and where it's going, and have that all repeated out. And there are people thinking about that. I've been to a few meetings where they're talking about how they present that data out and things can be managed. So they're thinking about this.
Yeah.
But I guess that there is a sort of agility gain, hence a dynamic media facility that, you know, I guess time to market to bring a new product to market is going to be theoretically dramatically changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Spin up a new show. I mean, we get requests, we're going to do something different, going to do this, and how long it'll take you to do it. And now it's months. And it shouldn't be. DMF,
days right now.
And from the dynamic nature, really, we're going to be able to start to try and achieve, I suppose, that nirvana that we've been thinking about for a while, which is build for not 100%, but build for 85 and scale when you need to.
Yeah, so that has a lot to do with the markets in which you serve, right? So I'm in a news environment. News always plans for the worst case. You know, the big explosion, the big thing. You'll always have to cover that. But things like sports are predictive, and entertainment are predictive. You have your schedule ahead of time. You know what venues and events you're doing, and you can kind of work out what, you know, the tier 1, 2, 3, 4 events. What are you going to do with what? So I think you'd probably see it more in those markets earlier than you would in a type of a news environment, I think.
I can see where you're coming from there. Conceptually, it lends itself more to that predictive dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. News is a reactive business.
Yes.
It's not a proactive business, so much as I try to make them be proactive, it's a challenge. But you know, maybe there is some there too, you know, to be able to spin things up, maybe in different locations. So.
Yes.
And you know, I think DMF doesn't mean it's in a facility. It could be anywhere.
That's right.
I think sometimes we actually get hooked up on the language, don't we?
And exactly. And why you want to have to roll a truck? Maybe I can use something that's available somewhere else. And,
very much goes to the REMI sort of model.
Absolutely. Yeah, world's changing, man.
Yeah,
it is.
Quicker than we are.
And in some ways, it is really for us traditional broadcast. You know, we talked a little bit off camera before about the new modern Gen Y, you know, millennial sort of doing things in a little different way. The creator economy, the more democratization of media and video. But we need to be more nimble as well.
Absolutely.
We need to be able to take advantage of those perhaps tier 2, tier 3 worlds as well. And this probably helps us do a little bit more than buying $1 million worth of equipment and locking it up in a truck.
Exactly, and I think the financial people at the top of the chain would appreciate any sort of flexibility there as well. So, you know, maybe you can do things a little bit differently, and you know, depending on the tier where you're going. So I think there are a lot of possibilities here. And again, you know, it's the natural evolution of things. and you got to embrace it. I mean, this is where it's going.
So if we fast forward, you said 6 months reporting back into the technical group, starting to really harness some of those business challenges or business influences in the technology development and the way that it comes to market. Let's fast forward a year, 2 years from now. Where do you see that the MXL DMF concept, the ecosystem going?
Sure. Well, I think, it's a lot of, you heard buzz about it at IBC. A ton more buzz about it now because things are moving, right? So, and there'll be the early adopters. You start to hear about the early adopters, hear what their trials and tribulations were, and we'll see where that goes. But I think next year you really see the demos of things, right? So maybe the 27 NAB is all about showing possible applications and where things go. And that starts to click in people's heads, and then they look at, new builds, who's got a new build schedule, who's got new shows, who's doing whatever. And I think maybe in 28 you start to see more deployments beyond the early adopters, right? So, but I think it's got a long tail to this. People aren't knocking facilities down to build something. These are, folks that are looking at what's the next thing to do, and is this the right step to make? And it was like that with IP.
Exactly.
I would still
That's
tell
taken
people.
a long time.
I would still tell people, if you have a small facility, do it in SDI. I mean, IP gives you scale, but it comes at a cost.
Cost, complexity.
Cost and complexity, absolutely.
And I think that's where you say you've got a really good point there, which is the small Remy productions, the small, outside of
the lower tier ones.
Yeah.
Is what, a lot of the broadcasters.
Yeah, and the outside of the facility, the outside of the F in the DMF, is probably going to be the first or
more of the first.
I could see
Well,
that
it's low
happening.
risk. It's low risk as well. It's like less revenue associated
and
with
it's
it.
smaller, modular, chunkable.
Think if somebody's going to, let's say they build a truck on that sort of architecture. Maybe it's not a traditional truck with patch bays and all that sort of business, but it's more like a roll-up thing with a lot of servers.
Back to base, camera.
And you can easily configure that such to be, you think about things that are temporary setups, maybe there's a trial or things
I'm just thinking 12 months' time we're going to be running our podcast off.
Absolutely.
Exactly. You have a little DMF facility, there's a server and everything's going there. So.
Excellent. In fact, we won't even be here. We'll be virtual as well.
But if you think about those small knock-up, events that are maybe a couple days or maybe a couple weeks, and you don't need to book a big truck, or maybe you can have or even have your own rollout. We used to call those crash carts or
the DMF flight pack.
Yeah, flight packs. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Really interesting.
Yeah, well, very conscious of your time, Mike, and really appreciate you stepping out of the show and coming and talk to us.
It's a lot of fun to talk to you guys about this sort of thing. And,
excellent.
And just to see everything change. That's been the key for me in my entire career, is just, seeing change. And change is constant in this business. Huh? It's really, really.
It is. That's why we've all stayed in the industry.
Exactly.
I think.
That's why we need engineers too.
Absolutely. Look, the business of media tech is about the business of media tech. But the reality is that engineering is at the core of the way that we implement this business.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Cool. Brilliant.
All right. Well, thanks.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks again, Mike.
Thanks.
Cheers. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.